We're ready to kick things off here. Thanks for joining us after lunch. My name is Erin Otan. I'm the Director of Regional Engagement at the Solar and Energy Loan Fund, or SELF. We are a nonprofit green bank. CDFI based in Florida, but we work all throughout the South and beyond. We've recently expanded nationally into Nevada, Texas, Utah, and more states soon to come. We focus on financing climate infrastructure projects, primarily for people who cannot get access to traditional financing, so low-income residents, landlords of small multifamily residences, and novice developers working on energy projects. So I'm excited to have this conversation because we do a lot of engaging with communities, with regulators, and with utilities. So I'm excited to have these people up here for this conversation with me today. Please welcome Nancy Connor from the Illinois Utilities Business Diversity Council. Sorry. David Wade, the CEO of EPB, and Lorraine Akiba, the CEO and founder of LHA Ventures, and Heather Herndon-Wright, the Director of Supply Chain Diversity at Vistra. I'm going to let them all you'll hear more about them as we sort of get into the conversation. I'll let them do their own introductions as we get in, but we'll go ahead and kick things off. So Lorraine, my first question is for you.
Okay.
So what role does regulation play in facilitating inclusivity in communities and kind of promoting partnerships and diversity?
Okay. Big mouthful there. It's like, I guess that's the entire topic for today. Aloha, everybody. I am Lorraine Akiba, former commissioner from the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission. Great to see a lot of folks in the room here that I've worked with, and definitely going to call on the Austin Energy folks for some sharing after when we get to the discussion session. But yeah. Erin's tasked me with trying to kind of set the framework here of how does regulation fit into this. And I know the last couple days people have like, where's the regulators? And here I am to give that perspective. But regulators really do have a key role here. And even though many regulators self-identify, I'm an economic regulator, really I think that role is changing, especially when we talk about addressing energy equity, energy justice, and public engagement. And so if I were to say sum it up in a few words, I think the role of regulation is one, to be an outreach, education, to help both the community organizations and the utilities engage with the public, to be a facilitator of that, because if the commission puts together structures or mechanisms, and whether that's doing things like intervenor compensation like they do in California and Oregon and Washington State, or whether they do things like we do in Hawaii with identified metrics and making community engagement, community outreach part of every docket, and in terms of either technical working groups, community engagement kind of structures, and making that something that the utility actually is measured by. So you have identified goals, you have identified outcomes, and you have really equity being a tool to help accomplish these things. It's not just a goal and a concept, but it's a way to implement, and it is a way to move forward some of the policy priorities for the utility that have been identified. I think it's a really important role that regulators play, and you don't think of regulation as being proactive, but it is an important part of creating partnerships, and I think having true stakeholder engagement, and it really is, it sets the tone by virtue of having public policy, having the commission put its authority behind actions, and also making sure that the utility is recognized for those efforts, and whether that somehow, does impact cost recovery, that to make sure that those costs are covered when things are required to do community engagement. So I'd say that it really is even as fundamental as identifying what those equity goals are. What really, in a community, when you're dealing with, are you dealing with, large-scale utility project siting? Are you dealing with, some upgrades of a utility that might affect a community that's already been impacted by power plants, or impacted by virtue of, transportation corridors cutting right through the heart of their community and having economic impacts? Or whether you're talking about something like EV charging infrastructure, and how does that, in a community that's been underserved, or a low moderate income community, how do you actually, hear back from the community? Is this really something that's going to help the community? What are the things that will positively impact, and what are the things that, unintended consequences that you never think about when you're doing some basic things like even infrastructure? And I think what's really important is making sure there's an awareness throughout, whether it's with the legislature, or the people that are decision makers from the statutory side, or folks in the community from community-based organizations, or the utilities themselves, that there's an awareness. This is part of what should be integrated in everything we do with energy. It's not just like, okay, this is an add-on now that we got money from the feds to do, energy justice and equity. We're going to add this on as another thing, and we're going to pancake it on. And in Hawaii, we've made sure that this is part of every process, whether it's grid modernization, whether we're talking about a microgrid services tariff, whether we are looking at, community-based renewable energy, and how, folks who don't have access to rooftop solar can participate in a clean energy transition. And it is, in our state, we have done an actual docket. There are a couple states, I think Rhode Island, and I can't remember some others, that have actually set up a docket. So we do have an energy and equity, and justice and equity docket. So you can go to the PUC website to see what's been filed there. And it started with some extensive community engagement meetings. They've been doing meetings every few months since October of 2023. They just issued a report. The PUC issued a report in February that's circulating, draft report that's circulating for comment from the community, from the stakeholders, from everybody that was involved in the process, and the public. Even if you weren't involved in these meetings, you can comment. And there's been extensive dialogue. And I think that's really what's important, is the commitment of the regulators to this process, the commitment not to just talk the talk, but walk the walk, as far as making sure there is true public participation, that people that should be in the room are in the room at the table, even though they don't always have access. And in your communities, that could be, language access, that could be being able to come to a hearing, whether now with technology, we can do that remotely. They don't have to physically come to a proceeding or to a meeting to talk. They can log in, and we've got technology tools. The good benefit of having to deal with a pandemic and COVID, the technology tools are there now to do remote participation. So there's all these different things that I think regulations can help be the primary driver for.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the idea of being proactive instead of reactive on the regulator side. Lorraine touched on a few of them from her perspective, but for David and Heather, on the utility perspective or the energy provider's perspective, what are some of the barriers to creating effective partnerships? And David, since I can see you, I'll start with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think when you talk about barriers, I think every area's got their own set of barriers depending on what the situation is. We're a little bit different and unique than some others. We're a municipal utility that has energy and communications, and TVA is our wholesale provider. They're also our regulator, so our regulation is a little bit different than a typical PSC. That probably is an advantage for us in maybe even reducing some of the barriers, but it also takes away some of the advantages that we just heard about in that space. I think the some of the barriers may be the drive to do it. You know, our mission is to improve the quality of life in the community as our total mission as a public power. So our drive is out every day. How do we make that difference? And creating those partnerships take time, because I think the biggest barrier that I've seen is building trust. Building trust, because to go into folks that are not just like you, to partner with organizations that are different than your organization, means you got to learn how to trust each other. And I would think that the biggest thing that we've had to really learn is building trust is probably the most key barrier. Without that trust, you can't move ahead.
Great, thank you. And Heather?
Now, can you hear me? Okay, sorry. So I'm Heather Herndon-Wright, Director of Supply Chain Diversity and Sustainability at Vistra Corp. We're the largest integrated power producer, retail electric company, and generation. We don't have any transmission and distribution. We're not regulated. We're a Fortune 500 company, so 100% competitive, so a little bit different from a lot of the other utilities that are here today. And I guess I say, you know, not regulated as much as you can when you have nuclear power plants. And we go into states like Illinois where we have to report, we're not regulated. So anyway, I have been very fortunate, particularly in my role, because there are so many organizations that it's easy to partner with that are looking to partner with us. I think one of the things that came up earlier today was communication and awareness. So I know for me, one of the barriers has been, especially as we continue to acquire companies and move into new states and new areas, is just knowing who the organizations are there that we can partner with. And even in the state of Illinois, for instance, we've added a new category from a supply chain diversity standpoint, 2 new categories, in addition to minority, women, veterans, service-disabled veterans, LGBT, and disability-owned businesses. We're now looking for businesses that are owned by formerly incarcerated individuals, returning citizens, and former foster care recipients, which I think is just great, because when you do look at our communities, that's exactly, those are the individuals we need to be looking for entrepreneurship and to help them grow their businesses and to be able to give back into the community. So it's just identifying where are those companies, where are the type of businesses that we can partner with to be part of the Vistra supply chain. And particularly in the renewable space, as we're transitioning to from our traditional coal to solar and battery storage, how do we bring those companies along with us? It's an emerging market for all of us. For the big guys, they're trying to figure it out, let alone the small businesses and the diverse suppliers. But a lot of innovation, that's where it's coming from. So I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity. Today, I've got my cheat sheet so I can tell you what we do. Unlike Alice, who could whip off the megawatts everywhere. We are currently in 12 states. We've got about 50-ish power plants. We're decommissioning a lot of our coal plants and some of our gas plants and converting it to solar and battery storage, producing that 41 megawatts. We have battery storage today of 1,020 megawatts. 750 of those are in Moss Landing, California. So until recently, we had the largest battery storage facility in the world. And I think we're on track to get there again because we've got another 750 planned. And that's strictly just battery storage in partnership with a gas plant. So we really are looking at new ways of generating electricity, at innovation that we can bring to the table. Talk to a couple of the companies here, talk to one at lunch that I think we just want to introduce to the business. So one of the biggest barriers for us is just finding the businesses that we want to do business with and being aware of the DOE opportunities and all those other organizations out there that we can partner with to find these companies.
I add just another barrier that we've just ran into in the last 6 months or so that is a kind of a new barrier. Is this year was the first year we formally disclosed the Carbon Disclosure Project. And the feedback we got, one of the detractors of the feedback is we did not have strict enough vendor certifications. And that push between trying to get higher processes on the carbon disclosure and creating onerous requirements for small businesses. I know in some of the ones that we've registered with, the requirements are onerous for us, and I can't imagine what they would be for a small business. So I think that's going to be a barrier that we've got to keep our eyes on to make sure that some of the requirements we get pushed in these carbon disclosures don't eliminate small and diverse business entities.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, and I'm gonna kind of draw on an example. I mean, sometimes when we put into place something we think as a policy or as a regulatory driver, so long as that requirement to report or that requirement to try to enable more technology doesn't become something that then becomes entrenched and inflexible. And I think we've seen that in terms of standards and codes and such, and in terms of reporting requirements. I think it's making sure, and this is from the regulator's perspective, and here's where the dialogue has to come from, folks like you in the audience, if you're dealing with regulators, is to make sure they're aware of, yes, we want to incent, we want to make sure that these things are done and give it the force of the regulation to make sure it's, for those that are a little slow and need a little nudge, that they get it done. But then we also don't want to make it so, like I think Dora uses the term hard-coded, so that it's inflexible as technology changes, as things evolve, that there is enough in what we do set up as a framework or as standards or as requirements to change with those developments as we continuously improve technology processes and also have new stakeholders involved. We don't want to become then a barrier, and the regulation, the framework itself becomes a restriction and inflexible.
Thank you. So we've heard about some of the barriers. Now, Nancy, you work with a group of utilities. What have you seen in terms of partnerships? How do they approach them, and how are they leveraging the partnerships that they do have to better serve their communities?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. So I'm a little bit unique. I don't work at any utility, but I work for a consortium of the regulated utilities in the state of Illinois. So thank you for your introduction to the world of regulators. I don't think IUBDC would be here if it were not the case in Illinois that the utilities, public utilities, are all regulated. So in 2015, 6 utilities in the state, the big ones, NICOR, ComEd, Ameren, Peoples Gas, Aqua Illinois, and also Illinois American Water. So we're water, gas, and electric, but they've all formed a consortium together for the purpose of advancing diversity and inclusion within their collective supply chains. So individually, they all have their own supplier diversity programs. They do report out to the Illinois Commerce Commission. The reports are just turned in yesterday. So you can go to Illinois Commerce Commission and see how each of those individual utilities have done with their diverse spending. So minorities, women, veterans, et cetera. It's all collected and reported back to the Commerce Commission. So the IUBDC was formed for the specific purpose as a forum for best practice sharing, information exchange among the utilities, and all with the focus on advancing growth and utilization of diverse suppliers. So, and my understanding is this is pretty unique in the United States. We kind of get inquiries from other states thinking about trying to do something like this, and we got a little bit of a head start. We're going to be 10 years old next year. So in terms of best practices and information sharing, the things that we do really well are providing educational opportunities for diverse suppliers. We do workshops, we do webinars to help all of them understand more about the needs of the utility space, how to engage with those individual utilities, and then and then after that, we go a little bit further even. We sponsor scholarships for eligible suppliers to attend the Kellogg program at Northwestern University in Illinois, to attend this advanced management education program that's put on by the NMSDC. You can see a theme here, right? Everything we do is focused in on helping diverse suppliers grow within our supply chain. So real proud of the work that we've done. I can tell you that in addition, so we have the individual utility reports posted on the ICC website, but IUBDC, our nonprofit, we also publish an economic impact study about our collective impact throughout the state of Illinois. And I can tell you that in 2022, it was a 2-year report. There was $2.8 billion spent with diverse suppliers amongst those 6 utilities, of which 1.7 was spent in the state of Illinois. So that's really something that we're really proud of, and as collectively, that is a great accomplishment for all our members.
Great, thank you. Heather or David, do you have any comments to add to that?
Well, I can talk about, a lot of our work is symbiotic, right? Especially with the IUBDC, they actually developed their bylaws or rewrote their bylaws to allow non-utility companies to participate specifically so that Vistra could become part of it and work closely with them. So I think also when there are organizations that maybe you don't necessarily have a role or a way to participate in today, if it's something that you know is going to benefit your customers, your company, your supply base, you can work with those organizations and say, hey, we want to get active, we want to participate, we have the common goals, how do we get engaged and how do we work together? And that's where Nancy and I were able to work together and really share suppliers. Even we were talking to somebody earlier, within our industry, which is highly competitive, we will still collaborate with our competitors so that we can share our supply base, because again, we're all trying to get to that place where we're growing these businesses. It's growing our bottom line, it's growing their bottom line, it's increasing the value in the communities. So I think really being able to partner with other organizations. We also, there's minority business and women business and veteran business organizations out there that we are all part of, sit on the boards of, help grow and develop those, and being able to find those suppliers and bring them into this industry from other industries, right? There's a lot of cross-pollination we can do with suppliers that aren't necessarily in the generation or retail electric industry. So we're able to partner with those organizations, try to identify them and grow them in our space. And it's just been wonderful to work with the legislators in Illinois as well. We helped draft the legislation for the coal to solar, basically making it money out for us to be able to decommission our coal plants and convert them to solar and battery storage. So being able to work at that level in all of the events the IUBDC does with the legislators and the commissioners there, getting to know them and build those relationships. Because at the end of the day, especially in supplier diversity, we don't buy anything. The most we can do is that relationship building. It's influential leadership. How do we get the right people to the right place at the right time for the right opportunities, and making sure that all the right players are in the room and connected? And so that collaboration and really working through the regulators and the organizations, the other utilities, and just in those partnerships is so critical to really grow all our communities where we live, work, and play.
Yeah, and I think when you think about partnerships, they're so critical, but they're not always the ones you think about. Sometimes the unusual partnerships come because you've built some general trust and because opportunities exist. And I'll go back to an example right in the summer of 20, when we were in the middle of the COVID and schools shutting down and all of those things, the school system came and we had a conversation about how do we get internet to all of the students. And out of that spun a program we call EdConnect that for the next 15 years, every student on free and reduced lunch has access to internet at no cost, 300 meg symmetrical internet. And it came out of partnerships coming together, because within 2 months, as a community, we raised over $8 million to fund that. It came out of small business, came out of large business, called that philanthropic groups. It came out of city and the county. It was such a diverse group of partnerships that came together to meet a community need. And I think that is, sometimes we limit who should be partners. I mean, there was a small restaurants that were giving small amounts. There were large insurance companies, and just, we shouldn't be blind by thinking our partners are limited. We should think about what can be if we can gain the community's buy-in towards big goals.
I can add to that too. One of the things that I think we weren't expecting but came out of the results of the activities we're doing in Illinois, and we're based out of Texas, but we're in 12 states for our generation business and 19 states plus the District of Columbia for our retail business. is working with organized labor, collective bargaining, being able to put together PLAs to help grow some apprenticeships, to be able to increase women and minorities that are in the collective bargaining that are at craft labor that we can bring onto our projects. And I think if we had not had the state requirement to do that in Illinois, that wouldn't happen. So, and I think had we not worked with the legislators, they would have never put that in there. So it really is a very symbiotic relationship in places that you might not expect to see it, where we can really grow our communities.
Lorraine, you touched on this a little bit before, but I was wondering if you could maybe expand on the equity piece from the regulator's perspective of ensuring an equitable clean energy transition.
Sure. I think there's two things. As a regulator, you can do things within your own proceedings so that to make sure that that's just ingrained, as I said, in every single docket, in every single proceeding, so that you make sure that that's, whether it's, an investigatory docket for citing of, large-scale utility, whether it's a docket to look at a tariff, a distributed energy resources tariff, and how that's going to impact different customers in that utility service territory, or whether it's a docket that's specifically looking at these issues of access, affordability, and being able to provide fairness to all members of the community with respect to resources in integrated grid planning, or in terms of resources that are going to come out to the community from various other programs that the regulators might be helping to administer with that maybe the legislature is giving you jurisdiction over in terms of implementing, or because of your role as the energy regulator. So really it's regulators themselves kind of taking stock and making sure that's in the DNA of the regulatory process. And then there's other things that you can do to help influence external drivers for equity. And that really is, as what some of my colleagues on the panel have alluded to, is and making sure that the utilities who are the drivers of this in terms of taking actions to ensure equity, whether it's in workforce development, as we're facing an aging workforce in many of our utility communities, and is there opportunities to provide underrepresented minority students coming out of engineering school or internships, or things like that, to facilitate that dialogue and to help to the extent there might be some regulatory oversight of utility programs, training programs, et cetera, to be able to be, again, flexible, open to that, encourage that from a regulator standpoint when you're looking at the traditional relationship of recovery, cost recovery, of approving programs and pilots of utilities. So I think that's very important, that the equity is really not an extra, but it is becoming part of how we look at every single thing we do in the energy ecosystem. And that in Hawaii, I think part of that process is really, and there are many studies and resources out there, so I would encourage that folks take a look. I mean, many of the states, whether it's California or the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, LBNL. There's a lot of recent reports and studies that have been done in terms of gathering the best practices across the country of what, really ingraining equity into the regulatory framework. So I would encourage you to go search online for some of these resources. You can also come to the Hawaii's website for and that equity docket that I talked to you about. I think it's docket number 2022-0250. If you go to the PUC website, I'm giving you that because unfortunately, we're just having this conversation at lunch. IT systems at regulatory agencies are not the best. And if you don't have that magic number, you will not be able to navigate the Hawaii PUC document management system, as Allison Silverstein, one of our facilitators, knows. She's nodding her head going, been there. So you need that secret magic number to be able to go to the docket where I've talked about many of these resources were cited in the proceedings that we've had since 2023. So it can just be a kind of a good docket to review if you're starting to on this journey in your community. But I think what I would like to say is that I'd like to see us get away from the traditional rate recovery model, because I think it's a time suck. It's a waste of time for utilities, for customers, and for regulators. The lawyers and the expert witnesses make a lot of money. So, but I think the process is not that productive, if I were to say that. It's not because I'm a former commissioner. I think I can speak candidly about that. And really, performance-based regulation is really the future to really allow us to do this, so that you identify ahead of time, you know, what the goals are. As I said, it's important for regulators to identify what is the goal, what is the equity goal, what is the tool that we're going to do, you know, how is equity going to be a tool to accomplish equal access, affordability, you know, making sure everybody has public participation, community benefits are recognized. And so you have to have known, you know, performance indicators so people know what the rules of the game are. I mean, utilities are very success driven, and you know, they want to succeed. I don't think utilities don't want to succeed for various reasons, but if it's not clear what is success, if it's not clear, you know, how will we be measured? So equity can also be a metric for success of a utility, for success in terms of these community engagement. If you can truly show that you've accomplished more access, that you've utilized the existing categories of whether it's LIHEAP and, you know, some other categories, and you've increased the access because you've made your information more user friendly or more accessible to customers, because you've made it available now in 5 languages, because those are the community members that you have. You know, people speak in your community not only Spanish and English, but they speak other languages, you know, that need to be included in some of your materials, whether that's Tagalog or, you know, some other ethnic you know, community that needs a language assistance, and making that just part of, it's not an extra, it's these are members in your community that English is a second language. And you know, if you have the ability to make it available so that people can access and educate themselves and be proactive as customers, and then access the programs and better know what is available for them, that's really truly accomplishing, reaching out to underserved communities. Those kinds of things are very important. So I think performance-based regulation does that, because it's not all about, you know, CapEx, and at the end of the day we true up, and then you get, you know, your return on investment or return on, you know, equity. Maybe that's in the investor-owned utility world, but I think in the cooperative world, it is really about the community. So it's the community engagement, and what are the indicators that will make sure you know you're doing a self-check. You know, am I just kind of talking to myself in the mirror, or, you know, am I really accomplishing what I, as an organization, whether it's a muni cooperative, rural cooperative, have set out to do based on what my members have told me to do? And I think you have to hold yourself accountable, and regulators can help you in that by facilitating that dialogue, by also recognizing the actions that help you accomplish that. And that is the proactive role of a regulator. We can't just sit back and go, well, you know, somebody else's work, not mine. We have to be an active partner in that, and we carry a lot of clout as regulators. I mean, let's face it, you know. And so it's being responsible and engaged as well, and to make sure that once these things are set, it's not just something that sits on a shelf as a convenient report and the utility is actually doing something else. So active engagement, active monitoring, pulse checks all the time.
Thank you for sharing that about the translation of communications into multiple languages, because that's a diversity supplier opportunity right there. There are a number of really highly qualified translation companies that can provide those services.
We've got about 6 minutes left, so I wanted to see if there are any audience questions. There's one right there. Ricky, could you come? Sorry, Emma, can you come grab one of these mics? I forgot Ricky doesn't work here anymore.
Oh, Ricky.
Thank you. So there are sadly an increasing number of states that are, if anything, going anti-diversity and anti-equity. And which means that a regulator like a PUC commissioner or as other state officials cannot be in a utility space about supporting DEI and equity initiatives of this type. Can you on the panel talk about whether there is an economic or business justification for doing this without your regulator telling you to? Thank you.
So I'll be happy to start with that if you want, David, and you can take it after that. At Vistra, especially with the attack on ESG, period, right, environmental, social, and governance across the board, we really did a corporate strategic planning last September. In fact, Hank Stafford, who is leads our sustainability effort for Vistra, was part of that. His boss, my boss's boss, my CPO, his boss, and our team, and we went in and looked at it. You know, in the light of this, we know what we're doing is good for the company. It's a business case, so it's not just that it's the right thing to do, although that is one of our core values across the board. It's good for business, and we know that. So we went in with our C-suite and basically said, do we want to rename it because everything's become so politicized and weaponized? What do we want to do? How do we want to look at this? How do we want to move forward? And the bottom line was, come back and do exactly what you're doing the way you've been doing it. Let's call it what it is, because we believe it's good for business. So it's still supply chain diversity and sustainability. It's not corporate social responsibility or any of the other names that we had looked at and thought and considered. We just really do believe it's good. We had an outside law firm take a look at our website too to make sure that everything we have on there is not something that could come under attack. We talk about what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it. We have our process and procedures out there, so we're not setting false objectives. You know, one of my concerns have been with goals that have been set in the past. A lot of times that will drive bad behavior. You don't want to just put a diverse or small business in the supply chain just because they're diverse or small. But you do want to provide those additional resources to give them access, to give them opportunity, to give them training, to get them to where they're the most competitive. And so that's how we look at it at Vistra. I really believe from across the industry, from the utility space, that's how it is. At the end of the day, we got to make money. We got to keep the lights on. So how do we do that? And how do we engage and enable our suppliers to be able to do that? And now with supply chain sustainability coming across, that's another thing, right? That's just one more thing that we're all having to look at, and the cost and the resources of putting in all the 8,000 frameworks we have to report on. How do we engage our suppliers in such a way so that they can do it one time and we can all access that? There's an organization called the Sustainable Supply Chain Alliance. And there's a few others, but in the utility space, most of us are members of that. We have companies report at one time what their sustainability metrics are, and then we all have access to that. So they don't have to put it in 26 times for 26 utilities or however many. So I think most of us are really doubling down on it. Public agencies are having issues with it, certainly for Vistra as a competitive, publicly traded company. We really believe it's good for business. We believe it's what our investors are looking for. And we've got that board level support on down as to what we need to do and how we're doing it. So I think as long as we can keep building that business case, it won't go away. We just let the noise happen, and then it's a cycle, right? Corrosion back in the 80s, and then it just it cycles. So we're just working through it. In the meantime, we're just doing good business.
And I would agree totally. We're actually not regulated, enforced by regulation to have the programs that we have in place. In fact, we've been had our women and minority-owned business programs been in existence for over 20 years. We think it's good for our community. Our community supports us in that, and I think in a lot of ways it's more valuable once the companies decide it's the right thing to do versus being told they have to do it, because then it becomes something that is a numbers game that doesn't have as much meaning. So I think the answer is, I think it can continue, and it should continue on.
And you can make a solid business case for doing so.
Yes.
I wanted to call on, I wanted to comment because I want to get like a real case. I mean, I know I'm not from utility, but I know there's some community-based utilities here, and I warn them ahead of time, the fellows from Austin Energy, because they do a great job in terms of customer engagement, public engagement, community benefits. Both Carrie and Richard are here. Carrie's the Chief Customer Officer for Austin Energy. Can you share, in response to Allison's question, because you're in the heart of Texas, in Austin, of course, which keeps life weird, but I want to hear, like, on the ground, boots on the ground, what you guys are doing in response, because I think it's good to share that, to give encouragement to others in other jurisdictions.
Well, thank you, and I see your timing. Timing in Texas is long. Your timing was you gave me an advance warning, but it was like 2 seconds ago. So this is not planned. We know we were having lunch and had a discussion. I know you at the end of your hour, so we'll be very short. We've moved to a full community engagement process. And even before that, what has started with us, and we're still growing, is starting that we tied our employee experience to directly tied to our customer experience. And part of that is if we can have a diverse group of employees, very skilled, not in necessarily quotas or things of that nature, but the best people that represents our entire community, we're going to get results in the way and they interact with we interact with the community. And then with our programs, we have done a host of programs to go out, engage our community, take insights, and now, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, it's a good story, but also it's challenging for you because our customers are very demanding and they're very engaged. But what we find is the more that we do it, believe it or not, and we hire some of the best people, we always walk away with simple ideas that the community is asking us for, and they reward us because when we do what the community wants, we look at next door, we look at social media, we look at all of these things, and as soon as somebody gets in there and their facts are wrong, our customers chime in there and like, no, you don't have your facts right. Mm-hmm. So I could go on and talk about our specific programs, but what we do in our energy efficiency, all of our demand side management programs, all of this has been information that we've gone out to the community, to our stakeholders, involved them into the process. And then there have been some times where we just disagree. The science of it or the engineering or something behind the program doesn't match up. And what we have to do is go and communicate with the community as to why we're moving in another direction. But thank you for that platform.
Nancy, did you have one last thing?
Well, I was just, listening and thinking about, the business case, et cetera. I mean, the utilities, they want to reflect the communities that they serve, and that includes everyone. So their supply chains, they want them to mirror their customer base, the communities that they serve. I think, enough said. That's the business case right there.
Thank you for the great question. Thank you to our panelists. We're at time, and enjoy the rest of the event.